Dr. Burns, hi. Several days ago, you sent me an article that I thought was really fascinating about a particular situation you encountered. And I'd like you to set up the background behind this because it has great implications for both nutrition and for the environment and public health. So tell us about this article that you sent me.
Thank you, and good to see you, Dr. Klaper. So this was a blog post I wrote, a story from our mutual friend down in Florida. He thought it was time for a septic tank to be pumped. His neighbors were needing theirs pumped every few years. It's been several years. So he got the septic serviceman over there with the truck and the hose. The guy hooked up the hose and he looked in the tank and the filter. And he said to our friend, I don't think you're going to need a pump. Our friend says, it doesn't make sense at all. It's been years. The service guy says the volume of solids in the tank is quite low. It's just not due. And he said, by the way, the serviceman says, you guys vegans here? And our friend is incredulous. He thought maybe he saw a bumper sticker or who knows. And no, the guy, it turns out the septic man had been in business long enough to know the food stream of the household based on what the septic sludge looked like. This might have some interesting implications. What are your initial thoughts, Dr. Klaper?
There is so much in this anecdote that you describe, and that has a lot to do with our intestinal workings. Here's the man with the truck that goes around, and as septic tanks get full, when you flush the toilet, if you're living in a house that has a septic field behind the house, it's dug into the backyard's lawn there, if you will. There's a pipe that goes out of the house when you flush the toilet, and the first stop is the settling tank. And here the solid material, the solid feces, the toilet paper, the condoms, whatever's got flushed down the toilet, gravity will settle them out and the watery part rises to the top. And it's the watery part that then flows on down into the feeder lines, down into the leach field for the soil bacteria to purify the water. This is how it should work. Well, as the years go by, and often as months go by, if people are eating the standard Western diet, that settling tank starts filling up, not only with solid feces, but as the man puts his hose down there, he sees there's this thick layer of congealed fat that is containing the solid material that's been suspended in the water. And this is very profound. I ran into this during the first years I became vegan, and I was living in a house where I was on the dishwashing crew, and I was amazed that after a meal of rice and beans and greens, when it came time to wash the dishes, how quickly they cleaned up. Just one swish under the running water, maybe with a little brush action there and with a tiny bit of soap, zing, the dishes were clean. And the skillets where the cooking had been done, the stir fries and the steaming vegetables, again, a slick run under the water, and the vessel that was used to heat the vegetables came out clean. And I realized how different this is because I had a friend who was running a restaurant serving meat and complaining how often the grease traps in the back of the kitchen there had to be cleaned out because they filled up with animal fat. And people are eating a standard diet with meat and dairy and eggs, whatever. The congealed animal fat is what's sticking to the plates that requires the scrubbing and the hot water. And the beauty about the plant-based diet is that it's low fat, as vegetables are. And again, the broken up celery and rice just rinses off the plate there. Well, this is reflected in the situation the man found in the septic tank. He usually, because most people on his route are eating the standard American diet with meat and dairy, usually finds this thick layer of congealed fat that they got to punch through and break up and suck up. But here, everything was liquid, and there was a slight sheen on the filters. And what was happening, of course, the only thing coming down in this toilet tank was the digested plant material that the people had eaten. The bacteria in that septic tank, similar to the bacteria in our colon, love all this plant fiber that's coming down because they quickly digest it into butyric acid and soluble acids that then get rinsed out. And that's what the sheen is. It's just a leftover fine plant fiber on the filter there. And of course, this is reminiscent of what must be happening in the colons of people who are eating the standard Western diet. Their colons must reflect what the people find in their septic tank, that thick, heavy animal fat-laden sludge, versus the people on plant-based diets. Their colons are relatively clean, and they pass these soft bowel movements on a daily basis that aren't terribly odoriferous. This is really profound, of course. It has implications for digestion, certainly for colon cancer risk, which is far lower in people eating plant-based diets. And it's a microcosm of what's really happening inside our bodies. They say garbage in, garbage out, like the computer folks say. Well, it's certainly true when it comes to our intestinal health as well, showing up in this very astute observation by the man who runs the suck-up truck from the sewage company. So at a minimum, that's the first thing that struck me there, and there was just a rightness about this. It is such a validation of the biochemistry and the microbiology of plant eating versus animal eating.
After running experiments to really establish causality, is the volume of solids low because of the plant-based diet and the particular anaerobic bacteria that were fostered in our friend or his family's colons that went into the tank and did their work? That's what we think, but we would, to really be sure, we'd have to run some experiments. But the fact that the septic tank service guy made that observation out of nowhere, knowing nothing about our friend's household or habits, because he looked back, there's no bumper sticker, there's no other indication. I mean, that's quite telling. And you use the word sheen, you saw it in my article. That was a direct quote from the septic tank guy. He said, it's a particular sheen on the top of your septic sludge that we associate with people who aren't eating meat. I wonder what that sheen represents chemically, but it's just, there's something more efficient and cleaner about not only the digestion in one's body, eating a plant-based diet, but also the digestion downstream as our waste gets percolated into the environment, gets gradually treated by the bacteria that break it down and leaches gradually back into the groundwater. We want that process to be as efficient and clean as possible, because all of this waste, it's getting back into the environment. It actually doesn't stop in the toilet bowl. There's more of a life cycle of these nutrients and nitrogenous compounds, and we wanted to minimize that footprint.
Yes, I suspect the sheen probably has something to do with chlorophyll. That people are eating lettuce and kale and chard, etc. We absorb a fair amount of it, but a lot of it goes out in the fecal stream from the plant-eating people as well. And then the bacteria start munching on the chlorophyll, and it's probably waste products from chlorophyll digestion by the microbes in there. You can tell so much. Here's a sidewalk scientist making a very clever deduction, but actually the real scientists can certainly get a lot more information out of what's in people's septic tanks or what's in the sewage lines, because America has become so ill. Most Americans are on some kind of medication, beta blockers, estrogens, or cardiac drugs, etc., Ozempic. If someone could take a long aspirator and suck up some of that sewage water and send it to the analytical chemistry lab, and sure enough, they could find out who in that household is, again, taking estrogens, beta blockers, Ozempic, statins, metformin. My niece is the head of freshwater biology at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. As she said, Uncle Michael, people don't realize that people take these pills and they think that's the end of it. But, of course, it passes right through the body, goes out in the urine or the stool, and into the sewage system. And the sad reality is that the streams and rivers of America are running with metformin and beta blockers and estrogens. And it gets into the little creatures, the crayfish and the freshwater mussels and the minnows who live in those streams and rivers, and it affects their biology, affects their mating habits. We're all interconnected here. You can't do one thing, I'm taking a beta blocker to control my heart rate. Well, I'm taking metformin to control my blood sugar. Well, that's what you think you're doing, but meanwhile, there's a whole lot of creatures and ecologies downstream that are affected by that decision. We're all very, very interconnected, of course.
Normally we think about the upstream environmental consequences, the carbon emissions, the water and land required to grow these animals. We talk a lot about that. We don't as frequently talk about the downstream effects, all this food and the inefficient waste, digestion in the tanks, and where do you put all this waste? They have to pump, right? Imagine if most households need their tanks pumped twice as often as a plant-based household. That goes to a big waste facility, and it's got to sit longer in there and emit methane and percolate more slowly into the soil. What are the consequences of that on a great scale? We're seeing them, sadly. So another kind of angle demonstrating what we need to do in eating more plants.
Indeed. So the universe keeps sending us these flashing lights, saying, if you want to survive, if you want to be in balance, honor your plant-eating anatomy here and adopt a plant-based diet, and things will begin to heal, including our septic tanks and the ecosystem, as well as our colon health as well. So fascinating article and great import, great implications from this anecdote there. So thanks for bringing it to our attention.
Thanks to our friend for sharing this juicy story with us, and for everyone for listening. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.